Hello everyone and welcome to my very first Chessable video. My name is Kevin, the president of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And here I'm showing you the unknown poison pawn variation that no one ever really plays in the Najdorf. And even though it was employed against Spassky versus Fischer and actually beat Fischer, number one, best known Najdorf player in the world at that time. And this game is actually a game that my friend Jonathan played in the National Chess Open here in Las Vegas. And without further ado, I'll show you the game. So they go into the Najdorf. So e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6. Now bishop to g5 is played. Now e6, f4. He does h6 just to get the bishop, undefended on the h4 square. Queen to b6, and now, saying, can I take your pawn, please? And we're e4 players. We don't care about pawns. So we're just like, glad, of course you can take, come in my house. We're not gonna do anything crazy. So he's like, obliges. He takes on b2 like a real man. After, knight to b3. This is the move that was played against Spassky versus Fischer in both Game 7 and Game 11. And theory is Rook b1. Rook b1 is theory. But knight to b3, isn't a bad move also. It's, I would say, engines say that, black is very, very slightly better. I can even turn on the engine right now. Slightly better. 0.24, almost zeros, and now it's saying it's a draw. It doesn't. Who cares about engines? They're boring anyway. So after bishop to e7, the whole point of this idea is actually to bring this bishop back to f2, tuck it in. And Jonathan, understanding this, this dilemma, is that this queen is gonna have to go to a3. If this pawn is gone and if this bishop is gone, we can plop our bishop on c5, make the queen go back to b2, and trap it. So, that's his ideas. That's the common ideas. And here, black is always, thinking, okay, how am I going to get my queen back? Or is there a possibility of my queen getting trapped? And after g5, of course, he's having, the black player is having a little bit of anxiety here because he's thinking, oh, how am I going to get my queen back? My queen might get stuck. So he feels the need to actually play d5 in order for his queen to go back. And here is actually a very, very bad mistake because Jonathan can play e5. And with e5, we're putting our pieces, lining up the pieces towards the king. And this knight, needs to move, gaining tempo. So knight to d7, and then you notice that these pieces, look at this knight, very clumsy knight, hasn't even moved. This bishop is basically a pawn. This rook hasn't been, it can only go to a7. And now we do rook a to e1, and now all of our pieces are developed. And for the price of a pawn, with this queen out of the whole game, and none of the pieces are even coordinated, I definitely think we have a lot of compensation for this position. So after knight to c5, hoping to trade the bishop on d3, Jonathan's like, who cares? I'm just, I'm marching forward. I'm here to crush you. So after f5, he does bishop to g5. And here, remember what I said? We're not d4 players. We're e4 players. Why would we move the queen? Who cares about our queen? Take my queen. Queen takes on g5 is played, And here, with the idea is if h takes on g5, bishop takes on c5, forking both the rook and the queen. And now after queen goes to b1, knight to a4. And this queen is trapped. After queen takes on a2, rook to a1. And this queen has to be, has to take the rook. After rook goes back, rook goes to e8. You can't really save the rook. You have to, I would say you just have to develop. And if, if he wants to save the rook, you have knight to b6. And say rook to a7, you just take. and rook takes and bishop takes, and basically white is up the whole house here. So obviously, seeing this position, he understands that, you know, he can't take the queen. So instead, he takes on d3. Jonathan goes to g3. Knight takes. Rook takes on f2. Rook f to d8. And the idea is, you notice that this queen had to go 1 move, 2 move, 3 move, and then now the rook has to move. That's the 4th move, and now 5th move, in order for him to move his queen all the way back. That was the idea with this move. Rook to d8, not really doing much. Could have developed his queen side, but he wants to bring his queen back to defend, you know, this king side attack. So after f6, queen goes back to f8. Rook to f4, king to h7, rook to g4, and then he does g6. And now this phenomenal move that was found over the board. And I definitely would struggle in this position to find the best move. Where Jonathan, you know, being very gifted, sees that this knight isn't really doing much. So he wants to bring it back to e2. And I would say, you know, the hardest move to find is always with the knight back. With the idea of going to f4, bringing this knight to d4, and possibilities of maybe sacking on e6. And after knight f4, bishop goes back to, you know, e8. It's not really a defense, but, you know, white's already crumbling here, or black's already crumbling. And knight to d4, all his pieces are basically in the game. This rook is the only one that's not in yet. And after queen to g8, you notice that this king is kind of, you know, there's no squares. If this h-pawn was gone, we can just mate him on the h-file. So, Jonathan, noticing this, he does rook to h4. And let's say he does, you know, he does a move like knight d7. Let's say he does knight d7. Then you got rook takes. And this beautiful, phenomenal move. Rook takes on h6. And king has to take. He can't move. And then mate on h4. So, the opponent, noticing this move, he does h5. And now he takes, you know, Jonathan takes on h5. Queen goes to f8 in order to stop mate. And then knight goes back to f4. King goes to g8. And then queen to h3. And mate is very unavoidable without, you know, doing something like queen g7, which was actually played in the game. After queen g7, pawn takes, king takes, and rook to h8. Jonathan saying, no mercy here, I'm here to kill you. And in this position, both players agreed to a draw. No. In this position, black resigned. And this all stemmed off of this knight b3 move. After knight b3, it gets very, very tricky. It's actually never been, like, you know, really seen. And what baffles me is that this was played in the World Championship match, but no one ever really employs it. And, you know, they always go with rook b1, and I would think knight b3 gives you some practicality as well. And you see that after bishop to f2, you know, all his pieces gets very coordinated, and he's wasting a lot of tempo moving his queen back and forth. So that is it for my my Chessable video, and, you know, as always, I wish you many beautiful tactics and many beautiful mates. Goodbye.